Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. Today, our guests are co directors Gary Smart and Christopher Griffiths, whose new documentary, Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares The Robert Englund Story, is premiering exclusively on Screenbox June 6th. Guys, welcome on the show and congratulations on a really interesting documentary you guys did. How are you?
Yeah, just good. It's kind of really nice to be able to talk about it now to people who have watched it. It's like we've been, over the last couple of years trying to work on this, and now people are actually seeing it. It's just an amazing kind of experience now for us.
Well, Gary, how long did this take to put together?
We originally spoke to Robert, I believe, in November 2018.
Wow.
That was the first time we had a conversation with him about actually doing the doc, and then we met him in London in for March 2019, where he kind of confirmed, obviously, that he was happy to obviously move forward on the project. We started filming summer 2019, and then COVID obviously happened in the early 2020, and we kind of our last interview with Robert was in October 2022. So
Nice.
it's been a long process.
Yeah.
COVID's kind of helped us in the real. I know it was shitty for everybody, but it kind of helped us because it gave us a breather
Yeah.
to reevaluate the project and obviously build a relationship with Robert as well.
Now, Christopher, before we continue, what is that? That's a dog. On Can we see the dog? Let's see the dog.
There
Oh,
you go,
Don't,
Bruce.
no,
This is
don't.
the live debut.
you know
It's
that
a
reminds
rat.
me of similarly to the dog in Men in Black, the one that could talk.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Frank, my little Frank.
Now, Christopher, tell us how long have you and Gary worked together?
So this will be our 10th. Yeah, pretty much our 10th anniversary come September. And
Nice.
you can sort of see, if you'd seen what I looked like 10 years ago, the exponential rate of aging's kind of rapidly increased. So I could have looked a lot better by this point.
Well, at least you have your hair, which is more than I could say. So, Chris, this documentary is not just about the Nightmare on Elm Street films. This is about Robert Englund's career, and what a fascinating career that he has had. Like I was telling Gary before we went live, seeing him talk in this documentary, his eyes are just light up, talking about his career. What part of Robert's story really, stuck out for you?
I think the main thing for me is, I think if I had a preference, it's got to be the early days. I think, I use this anecdote quite a lot, and as crass as it sounds, but we're in a day and age now where if you fart in a microphone live on the internet or on TV, you're a celebrity. We all know Robert, obviously, as Freddy Krueger, and I know the mandate for this project was to go beyond the glove and the fedora, but of course, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But I think what's so endearing and amazing, to be honest, and admittedly, as a film nerd, I knew he had been in stuff. I knew Big Wednesday, Stay Hungry, and everything like that. But we're talking like 14 years worth of a career
Mm-hmm.
before A Nightmare on Elm Street, 12 if you want to, if you factor in V. But that's like all those years of doing this work and the stuff he rocked up in. I didn't even know he was, a small part, but in A Star Is Born, the
Yeah.
Chris Christopherson one. So I think that's what I enjoyed the most. I mean, we've primarily covered a lot of 80s stuff with our existing projects, and I equally love the 70s, all genres. So to be able to kind of delve into that world a little bit with this project and with someone who's such a great storyteller was probably my favorite part of this project.
And those of you who think you know Robert's whole career, trust me, when you watch this thing, you are going to learn stuff that you did not know. Now, Gary, for me, I got introduced to Robert as Willie from V. Now, I don't know if the V originally was a TV miniseries. It got rebooted like about a decade ago. A very popular show. Now, the character of Willie, I don't know if you ever watched it, is a complete 180 to Freddy
Yeah.
Krueger, okay? Shy, timid alien. He was an alien, but a good alien. He was one of the good guys. When was the first time, Gary, that you saw Robert on the screen?
It's got to be Freddy Krueger for me. I mean, I was allowed to watch horror films at a very early age, and I remember vivid memories of being in primary school. So probably being at the age of about 5 or 6,
Yeah.
having the VHS copy of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. I remember having that for Christmas as one of my presents. I had that and the Amityville 2. my parents were screwed up. I had Amityville 2 and I had Nightmare on Elm Street 2 on VHS, and I was taking it into school and lending it out to people. And I had a big poster of Freddy Krueger on my bedroom door. We'd bought it from a local like seaside town, and I begged my mum for it and my dad, and they bought it me. So it's always been at the very start for me was Freddy Krueger, and because I loved film even as a kid, I loved special effects. I kind of knew who Robert was, but I would look at the credits and look at names, and I would try and do some research. And obviously back then it was very difficult in the probably mid '80s, and obviously as I got older, the internet started coming obviously a bit more out. You was able to obviously go on the internet and find more Robert's work. So yeah, it's going to be cliche, but it's Freddy Krueger for me, definitely.
How about for you, Christopher? When did you first see Robert on the screen?
Well, you'd be really surprised to hear it was Freddy Krueger. It was Freddy Krueger. And, I think that's kind of, again, the same kind of, not a dilemma at all, but with the documentary. Oh, you're doing something which is not Freddy Krueger. Yeah, there's a lot of Freddy Krueger stuff in there. So, yeah, it was. I think it was the original Nightmare on Elm Street I saw first. But I think I saw it a bit later than the other respective franchises. I think Chainsaw Massacre was a bench for me at quite a young age. And then Friday the 13th, and then Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one.
And he has become such a horror icon. Gary, there are no shortages of stars that come out for your documentary. Lance Henriksen, Eli Roth, Tony Todd, just to mention a few. Since you did have a good 4+ years to put this together, was it pretty easy to get to everybody when they were available, or were there challenges along the way?
At first, there wasn't many challenges. It was, again, I don't want to keep going about COVID, but it was pre-COVID. And obviously, we normally go on these projects, 3 or 4 weeks in the States. We schedule a studio by our amazing producer, Mikey Perez, in the States. Yeah. He does all that for us. And we kind of everybody came on board. I think because it was Robert, and everybody loves Robert. Mm-hmm. So, there were a few scheduling conflicts and people we probably wanted and we didn't get. I think that was mainly because of COVID. And obviously, by the time COVID was over, we'd already got so far into the narrative of the doc and so far into the edit, we just couldn't then get people in. Yeah. And even right up until probably 18 months ago, it was very difficult to do interviews, and we didn't want to do Zoom interviews. We didn't want to do things like that. We wanted the on camera, high quality, obviously interviews with people. So no, not really. It was kind of easy-ish to a degree. I'm saying that now retrospectively because it was probably really hard at the time. But I think once you've got Robert, and I think when people notice about his career, people love him. And Eli Roths and Adam Greens, Corey Taylors were straight on board. There was no kind of hesitation. It was like, when do you need us? Now, and that was a testament to him.
Exactly. Now, Chris, as you're listening to all these people recount their stories about Robert, was there any particular person or story that stuck out for you?
Ooh, good question. Oh, I should have thought this one in advance.
They all had amazing stories to tell.
Yeah, they all did. It's a weird old thing because we're fanboys, right? And I always want to kick my ass when I realized, when at the time, I'm like, I don't think I absorbed that I was sat opposite Lance Henriksen or Eli Roth or anything like that. Because the main focus at the time of doing when you're with these people is the job comes first. I'm glad I've got that kind of work ethic about me because I could gush otherwise. So I'm always really focused on that. And a lot of people, to be honest, all we had to do was, okay, question 1, can you introduce yourself? And then 3 hours later, you're like, oh shit, question 2, because they go. And so I think what, there's a lot of documentaries out there now where it's like, oh, it's this person, it's that person. Corey Taylor, a friend of mine, kind of, not bulked up, but it was like, oh yeah, you got Corey Taylor because he rocks up and everything. But he did work with Robert.
Yeah.
I think everyone we got there has got first-hand experiences with him. So they all kind of serve purposes in different ways. So in terms of the edit, it's hard. I'm kind of going around this question, but for me, I think it was very interesting to have the likes of William Catt, for example, from Carrie. The fact that they had sort of they'd had their time in the theater together, and then, the Star Wars audition process periods, which seemed to be everyone of that era coming together, and then ultimately to the big Wednesday. So I think what I found interesting was kind of plucking out these people to say, oh, you represent Robert's early life. you represent that peak period of the 80s, and you guys represent then the new generation of, people he's worked with. That's the interesting thing. It's those he learned from, those who are his colleagues who he still learned from, and then there's those who he eventually kind of would end up mentoring. And they all pretty much had the same thing to say, just how generous a person he was.
Now, you are, Chris, one of the editors of this documentary. That's correct, right? Now,
Yeah.
in post-production, when you got to trim all this stuff down to 2 hours or less, I mean, I put myself in your position for a minute. I'm like, what a nightmare, okay? 3 hours per person, and you got to fit everybody into 2 hours or less. I mean, did you have any kind of standards of what stayed and what didn't?
Well, historically, we've had put it this way, to the average, film goer, film viewer, whatever, we sometimes get flack for it's too long. And then when he cut to the fans, genre fans and the, topic specific fans, it wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
So there's always that delicate balance we're trying to work on to get that right level. But the other editor, Pete, had already done an edit with the guys. I kind of came into the edit. It was about early last year, wasn't it, Gary?
Yeah.
And we basically, there was the original edit, and then there was our edit that Gary and I were working on in this very room till about 4 o'clock in the morning, beating each other up. It still smells of him in here right now, actually. It's kind of quite enjoyable. It's a struggle, and it sounds really pretentious, but edits I've got to a point now where I feel like edits find themselves. They'll sort of tell you, you've got to lean this way. This is, you feel it. It's like intuition.
Yeah.
But I mean, the key to it is get the information across in a lean and mean as fashion as possible, which we used to not do. Mm-hmm. We used to just let things just roll out forever. So it's tough, but you've got to look at it as a project holistically. And I think the biggest thing now is having such easy tech available or readily available of transcribes. So you get these documents, and then you've got to pick your topics, and then you kind of filter out and you go, okay, Eli's talked about that. Mick Garris has talked about that. Who says it best? Which one works well with the other? So it's laborious, but I dare say it's quite fun. And yeah, things do go to the wayside, but much like our previous documentary, Pennywise, we don't scrimp on the bonus features, or we don't just have excess cuts. So we've actually got independent pieces. For example, Nightmare Cafe, the series he did in the early 90s. Yeah. We got, was it Gary Jack
Coleman
from that. But unfortunately, the story didn't quite fit into the overall narrative. However, we've now designed a 6-minute piece that will be one of the bonus features on the Blu-ray.
Very nice.
So yeah, you've got to have a balance of how far do I want to go into this topic, but at the same time, let's keep the momentum going. Let's get on to, don't lose your audience because you're going too far down one rabbit hole. So it's difficult, but at the same time, it's not. It's really weird.
No, I get it.
But it's quite fun. It's like having a jigsaw to play with in a way.
Now, Gary, listening to Robert talk about Freddy Krueger is really fascinating in that he says in a roundabout way that Freddy Krueger is an entity unto itself. It doesn't need Robert to survive. A lot of people would disagree with that. Mm-hmm. How do you feel? What do you think about how he views the character that he brought to life?
I think it's very difficult for Robert, and I think that it's kind of double-edged sword, isn't it? And that's the whole point of the doc as well. He's created this iconic character, and it's kind of defined his career. And I think it's hard sometimes for Robert to. He hasn't got an ego. Robert hasn't, so he doesn't like be talking too much. It's really weird about himself and about his legacy.
Yeah,
he kind of shy. It's really hard to get it out of him. I mean, the original title of the documentary was called Icon, and Robert asked for it to be changed because he didn't feel he was an icon. And he's thinking, how can you not feel you're an icon? You are the last great horror icon with Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Lugosi. So I think with Robert, it's kind of he has embraced the character, but like you've just said, I genuinely believe that there is no Freddy Krueger without Robert. Mm-hmm. And I think Eli Roth says in the documentary, he says, everybody loves Freddy Krueger, but actually everybody loves Robert Englund. That's the key thing there, that the reason why that character has been so successful, and when we tried to remake it, it didn't quite work, was because Robert is, obviously he's not Freddy in regards to the entity, but he every pore of obviously Freddy Krueger, Robert comes out of it, and I
Exactly.
think that's the comedic timing. When you see Robert in real life, and obviously I hope it comes across in the documentary, he's got that quirkiness that Freddy's got. He's got the the cheekiness and the twinkle in his eye.
Yeah.
So I think it's very difficult. I think Freddy is an entity. He's his own kind of like iconic pop status is here.
Yeah.
But Robert is the puppet master, really. It's not the other way around. And sometimes people think it's Freddy that defines Robert. It's Robert that defines Freddy for me.
And just how humble he is, and to listen to him is amazing. Chris, obviously, him and Wes Craven, the late Wes Craven, had a really close relationship. When you were listening to Robert talk, particularly about his relationship with Wes, what were your overall thoughts on that relationship that they had?
I think ultimately it's the trust between them. I think as well with Robert, because we don't go too far into that on the documentary, if I had to be honest. One of the things where we kind of didn't go too far with that, but obviously we've got that archival interview with Wes, because obviously it'd been a no-brainer. So he's kind of one of the ones I wish we could have had, to be honest, on this documentary. I mean, God knows he's done, as we've said to people, Never Sleep Again. The documentary covered the franchise so well, and it has tons of Wes in that. So we've got this nice little archival piece where, because Wes Craven's one of those very thoughtful people who always talks about the dichotomy of good and evil within us all and everything like that, and the fact that he kind of knew Robert had it. I'll sort of speak again in a roundabout way that I think the main thing from Robert is he always pays attention, and he always absorbs and gets things from different directors, if that makes sense.
It does.
We've got this little anecdote of obviously his perception of what he thought Wes was going to be like David Lynch or Tim Burton or some goth guy, and then there he is in his pinwheel corduroys and dad puns and God knows what. But I'd say ultimately, Robert's one of those people who, no matter if you're his senior or his junior, will always respect what you've got to say and do. So, yeah.
Now, Gary, Robert seems very content that when his career is done with and people look back, that the character of Freddy is what he is going to be known for. He seems very content with that. How does that strike you? Because here you have this amazing actor who has done such amazing work outside of the Nightmare on Elm Street films.
Yeah.
But he's resigned himself to, hey, people are going to remember me for this one character. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think it's the blessing and curse, really. The blessing of having a character like Freddy Krueger, to shape your career and have you up there, obviously, always remembered on people's walls. And you're wearing a T-shirt now with Robert Englund on and Freddy Krueger, and that will live long after Robert, passes, and we all pass. Freddy Krueger will still be around, and Robert will be obviously so connected to it. And obviously, the curse of it is that does it restrict your career? And we know that there's actors out there. We won't mention names, and we've met horror actors who I think are quite bitter about playing certain characters, and we've experienced that personally, where on camera they're very kind of energetic and talking about the character. As soon as we switch the camera off, it's quite negative, really. And they're just doing it because they have to talk about that character for the fans.
Yeah.
Robert is completely different, and I think he definitely has embraced that. And I think it's really right that he has embraced it, because that's why he's there with, I keep saying, like the Christopher Lees and the Lugosis and the Peter Cushings. You look at their careers; their careers started to obviously dwindle in the late 70s with Hammer. It kind of disappearing, really, in that kind of style of horror, that kind of really elegant horror went in the late 70s, became very campy with the old Hammer films. And obviously then Christopher Lee went on to have a massive career, obviously, with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, which was brilliant for him at Renaissance. But Robert was coming in just at the end of that. And I think because Robert is a classically trained theatre actor, Robert obviously then elevates himself above the standard horror icon to become this kind of legend in the horror industry, really. So I think it's really important Robert has embraced it. And Robert says in the documentary a couple of times that there's times where he didn't really want to embrace that, and he thought, is this it? And then I love that line when he says about his headstone, he'll probably say, "Here lies Robert Freddy Krueger," and his obituary will say the same thing. But that's really important, I think, really, that he he is remembered, and that we all want to leave a legacy behind, don't we? Everybody, everything
Yeah,
we try and do, if that's with our families or work or obviously our professional careers. But Robert's done that with this character. So if he doesn't embrace it, that's a massive issue for the fans.
it is.
And when the fans meet him and they love him and he cares about the fans, that's part of that journey, really, part of that legacy. So I think he's embraced it, and I think he rightfully has embraced it.
I tell people, be careful who you wish to meet in real life.
Yeah,
Be
yeah.
very careful who you wish to meet in real life. Now, Christopher, we actually know what would happen if the Elm Street movies were rebooted with a different Freddy. It's been done a while ago. It didn't go as planned. Do you think that the Elm Street franchise can breathe again without Robert as Freddy?
It's an interesting one. I'm not gonna be on the fence. I'm gonna be straight. I'm gonna say no,
I
but there's a
agree.
little bit, there's a bit of yes. I think we've discussed this before because we've had that renaissance of Candyman with the Jordan Peele iteration a few years
Yeah,
ago, and I thought it was quite an interesting. I thought it was an all right film actually, and an interesting approach where they managed to get a little bit of Tony Todd in there,
yeah,
but because of how limitless the Elm Street franchise is with all its visual aesthetics and dream worlds and this and that and effects. And the fact is, we highlight in the doc that the third film that Heather Langenkamp says, Robert was kind of hardly there on set because he was either a giant snake or, the puppeteer in the air and everything like that. So I genuinely feel there is still room, maybe not a great deal of time, and when I say that, we're talking, 50 years or whatever. They should definitely look to try and bring it back
yeah.
with and not with Robert completely. I think, as I said, you can go all over the place with the dream worlds. You could definitely incorporate Robert in there in places, albeit in a smaller way, in a more subtle way. So I don't know. I mean, it was proven with the remake, it didn't work
It
out
didn't
well.
work out. Yeah, and not
Uh,
not because the actor did anything wrong. I thought
No,
he was really good. It's just
no,
that people. It's
bland.
Robert. You know what I mean? Now, before we go, Gary, I want to have one final question for you. You guys have made a lot of documentaries together. You do a lot of writing. Chris has done a lot of directing. Um, how do you feel about the documentary genre? And in particular, what fuels your passion for horror?
I think for us, obviously, we started 10 years ago with our first project. And prior to that, there wasn't that many documentaries other than bonus features on DVDs, which are very short, as you know, and obviously
Yeah,
as fans of the film. You had the likes of Never Sleep Again, you had the likes of Crystal Lake Memories, or his name is Jason. His name is Jason. When we started, it was a small community, really. There wasn't many people doing it. And we ended, having this real mammoth kind of project with Leviathan, and then we went on to Pennywise and obviously Brewster, and it was quite a nice little community. It's gone really big now, and I think
yeah,
it's a positive and it's a negative because what it's done, it's kind of pushed the independent genre of documentaries, which we do, into a bigger audience, which is great. But at the same time, it makes us have to be a lot more clever and when we were before, a lot more smarter and more business, professional really in regards to how we do things. So that's why our project's a little bit more delayed now because we have to go through a lot of red tape to get these things out.
yeah,
I love the documentary drama. I mean, I said to you before, the very start, I knew when I was a kid who Robert Englund was because I was doing research as a kid, and I love the fact that you can just put a documentary on and just get right behind the scenes. And I think even the likes of Netflix and their documentaries now on true crime, and I love true crime. And it's like you get your Dharma documentaries and your John Wayne Gacy's, and you get even as much as a Coca-Cola documentary. People love it. People are binging on it, and I think that's really helped us obviously because what we've been you know battering through for the last 10 years of trying to be filmmakers
yeah.
and documentarians, it's become a lot more legit now where people really want to see
Oh
that.
yeah,
Hence, obviously, how successful this has been already. And obviously, we're doing a 4-part series on Robodoc, which comes out later this year through Screenbox. And that's, we never ever dreamed that would be a 4-part series, never dreamed of it. And our next series will be on Police Academy as a 4-part series. And it's like, again, when we started that project, it was only to be like a couple of hours, and people want that
yeah.
full documentary experience now. So I think the genre is brilliant. I think it's I think there's some it's very dangerous that anyone can do it. I think to a degree now, because you do kind of get overloaded sometimes with lots of projects coming out. But again, I still watch them. I don't care if there's a documentary on, the burning comes out, I'll watch it. If it's 9 hours, I'll watch it. And it's something I love. So I think we're lucky to be part of it, and we're lucky, hopefully, to be ambassadors for it as well.
What I've learned doing this show for several years now is after people watch a film or TV show or documentary, whatever, that's when they go scouring for more information on it.
Yeah.
Documentaries, interviews, after they've watched it. So that's really amazing. Again, everybody, the documentary is called Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story. It is premiering exclusively on Screenbox June 6th, just a couple of weeks away. Check it out. This is a fascinating documentary by Gary Smart and Christopher Griffith. Before we go, Chris, looking at all of Gary's memorabilia behind him, have you ever had the idea of swiping a couple of items?
Well, I've got him to make me some. My wife's not a big fan of this, but
I wonder why.
That's where things get a bit too freaky. But so I shouldn't chuck that away like that. No, I've been very lucky to inherit a lot of toys off Gary. I'm just hemorrhaging for space now. I've got my first child due this year, so I feel like that space is going to become far, far more limited.
Nice. I want to thank you guys so much again for coming on and sharing. I want to thank our audience, those of you who are tuning in live, and the many of you who will be watching this later on. On behalf of Gary, Christopher, and myself, stay safe. Watch the documentary June 6th. Stay walking. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Cheers.